Hello there, John Cuturillo here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, thank you to everyone who supports me in my work, be you a client who allows me the privilege of helping you with your goals, or a listener or supporter of the podcast. Thank you for allowing me to live my vision every day. Today's episode is going to be another discussion of business ethics, and as I've discussed in the past, there is great value in enterprise, and we often undervalue what enterprise can do for society in terms of how it allows for constructiveness and progress. Today I'm going to be discussing some more specific aspects of appropriate ethics as a person in business and as a customer of business. Now, as per usual, remember that nothing that you see on the internet should ever be taken as advice. If you have concerns about any part of life, whether it be business or otherwise, please seek advice from a professional. This is just a perspective that you can use for your consideration. It's not professional advice. Now, as I've discussed previously, business can be a vehicle for dishonesty, but it isn't inherently. Business is an opportunity for somebody to make a living providing somebody else with something that they also need to live. And many fantastic feats of humanity have evolved from people's business activity or have become people's business activity. So while business is often thought of as simply a dishonest game, the benefits of it, when it's done well, significantly outweigh the costs. And what's important to understand is that business is an equal transaction between the customer and the provider. That means that both parties have an equally important role in acting in good faith to ensure that the outcome is favourable. And something you need to know as a businessman is that people do make quick judgments of you, and if you don't have the right attitude and you're in your business for the wrong reasons, simply to make money without having any passion about providing quality service, or you're trying to deceive people, soon enough people will notice it and you will suffer a loss of business as a result of that. We'll discuss that shortly. The first part of this discussion is about sales. Now, technically, every form of business that you could possibly conduct involves sales of some description, because the purpose of any business is to make money so that you can survive. And any customer who engages with your business and purchases from your business is going to do so voluntarily. Therefore, the only way that people will spend money at your business is if you can convince them to. That is always going to involve using psychology to try to influence people's decision making. Now, the concept of doing that in any way, even if you provide the best quality products and services and are absolutely honest in your conduct, to some can appear to be rather ethically questionable. Even if that were true, the problem is that it's always going to be necessary to persuade people to purchase from your business. Absolutely every single business owner has to engage in some kind of activity to make people aware of them and to somehow convince them to spend money at their business. But if we balance the need to make money with the best ethics, then the net effect, that is to say the overall quality of the effect on the business owner and the customer, can be positive overall. The customer can still leave that transaction feeling satisfied and actually receiving a benefit that is worth what they paid for it. And there are a number of ideas that must be discussed more often because they're so central to good business. Something that many people don't seem to consider is that good selling skills are quite similar to good counselling skills. Too often I see salesmen simply throw a pre-prepared pitch at their potential clients and hope that it's going to persuade the client to spend money with them. They do a lot of talking, they don't do enough listening. Remember that not only do you want to provide the best service to your customers because you want them to spread goodwill about your business and potentially spend money with you again, it's also the right thing to do at a basic level to provide them with what they need rather than selling to them unnecessarily. So to be the best salesman, you also need to develop listening and communication skills. Often, if the customer is not informed about what they need to buy, which is understandable because in the end you're the professional, the customer can't be expected to know everything about what you're selling, that's your job. Often when they make a request of you at the first contact, they're not going to necessarily know all the information that's necessary for them to make the right decision. And it's highly unlikely that they've given you all the information necessary for you to give them the right advice or make the right recommendations. So what's absolutely critical is that when a customer makes a request of you, that you're actively listening to what they're saying and trying to identify not only the key facts about what they may want and what they may need, but also where the gaps in their knowledge may be and what knowledge they may need in order to make the correct decision, a decision that's going to be satisfactory to them. And then you need to ask the right questions. You need to be willing to ask your customers about what they haven't mentioned. If possible, the net effect should be that when the customer proceeds with the purchase and then goes to use that product or service, there should be no surprises except perhaps them perceiving the product or service as better than what they expected. That's a good surprise. But you should minimize as much as possible the opportunities for events to happen in which the customer has a reason to say, I wish the salesperson had have told me about this, but I didn't even think of it. You need to know the products and services and the situations in which customers are going to be using them, and you should be trying to ask those questions ahead of time so that the customer has everything they need to make the right decisions. Another idea that needs to be understood is, as I said, business is an exchange. That means that qualitatively, whatever the customer is paying, you then provide in quality of products and services, not just in terms of monetary value, but in terms of quality. That is extremely difficult to conceptualize because it's such an abstract concept, but there needs to be a threshold at which what the customer pays they receive in terms of quality, and what you give to the customer you're also receiving in terms of how much you're paid. They both have to be equal. If the client is paying too much and receiving too little, it's not fair on them, and they're not going to be spreading goodwill about you as a business. If your prices are too low or the client's paying too little, but you're giving a level of service or a quality of product that's only expected at a high price, that can be excellent for business, but there is a point at which you then lose money and could potentially suffer as a result of that. There is a fair balance point, and that's something that people have to understand. And it's something that is also important to understand as a customer as well, which I'll address shortly. If you can provide a higher quality of goods and or services to your judgment than your competitors, and you're charging more than your competitors, then that's how you can justify the higher price, by the quality that you provide. What's also important is that you don't just have slogans. I see this far too often in marketing. Businesses too often say, we provide the best quality service, we provide the best quality products. Those are empty slogans. Every business person seems to use them. What you need to identify is not just that you think your products and services are good. You need to be able to specify what do you do specifically that A, justifies what you charge for it, and B, that may be an advantage over your competitors. And you need to be able to specify that, and then you actually have to deliver it. Don't just say you will, but actually deliver it. And on top of being just the right thing to do for your customers, people are more often persuaded when they can actually see a measurable difference. That is to say, they can specify after listening to you or reading about your products and services, this is specifically what I will get that I can't get from my competitors, and this is why I should shop at this business rather than at another business. That is more likely to persuade people, and if you actually deliver on it, then it's better for your customers. What I've also seen happen in business, especially in the retail and entry-level services industry, is that a lot of people don't have a proper conceptualization of the value of other people's money, only their own. A lot of people just punch the clock, so to speak. They go to work, they do their job, they leave, they do the bare minimum that they're told to do. They don't think about trying to self-develop so that they can improve the quality of what they do. They don't take particular responsibility. They simply reason, well, I was told to do this, therefore I'll do it, and if the customer's not happy, then they can complain to management. It's not my fault, I'm just doing my job. Now, a lot of people are going to argue, well, if you're paid only the minimum wage, then why should you be doing more than what you're paid to do? And I can understand where this argument derives, but on the other hand, it's not a good attitude to have if your entire premise is, this is what I'm paid to do, therefore I'll just do it. Because think about this, a lot of self-employed people do more work than somebody in the same industry would do to earn the same amount, because they're responsible for absolutely every aspect of their business's operation. Think about what happens when you shop at some business at which the person serving you just doesn't seem to care so much about the quality of service they're providing to you. You'll always notice that. But if that's also the attitude that you're displaying to customers at your own job, then you have to ask yourself, why should anyone give me good service if I'm not willing to give good service myself? Yes, there has to be a healthy boundary. You can't do everything for your customers, but at the same time, having passion and being willing to really conceptualize just how important and just how hard earned somebody else's money is, and how you're handling that, and you have a moral expectation to give that person exactly what they're paying for, then that's not only going to benefit you because people are going to keep coming to you to spend money. You stay in a job from that, you continue earning your living, the rest of the business does well, and the customer is better served. Everyone draws benefit from that. Now, another major aspect of attitude is how you treat your customers otherwise, outside of the simple aspect of making money. I've heard a lot of complaints from people who have experienced this with business, and I've experienced it a lot myself. And I'm not sure if it's a systematic issue. It could simply be the natural fluctuation of how people function, but it has to be addressed nonetheless because it's extremely important. Pay attention to how you speak to your customers, and pay attention to the aspects of how you communicate with them, because communications are easy to misinterpret. Don't interrupt them while they're speaking. Let them finish. When they say something, take notice of it. And using techniques like active listening and reflection, allow the customer to see that you're taking notice. Be careful with the type of language you use. Don't be too informal, otherwise the customer will just think that you're spending time with friends. Speak as a business person. Use a tone of voice that communicates that you care about providing the best quality of service. Consider their perspective as well. Some people patronize their customers when the customer doesn't know something about what the business sells. In the end, it's your responsibility to be able to educate your customers correctly. It's your job to deal with that product or service every day. It's not the customer's. A lot of people do sound like they have some repressed anger or frustration when they speak to their customers. Yes, I get it. Not every job's fun. You may have issues of your own, and I understand that. I'm all for compassion, but don't make your customers feel bad. Okay? Don't make them feel as though you're angry at them or frustrated with them, because it's not the customer's fault. Yes, there are such things as rude customers, and dealing with them is a different matter, but when the customer's not being rude and they're just being legitimate in their interactions with you and they're being valid, don't let that come through. Remember, your customers are willing to put down their hard-earned money to shop at your business, so give them what they're paying for. Also, let's briefly discuss the topic of canvassing, when another business phones you and asks for a favour to help them get business. There are a lot of scammers in the world today, and I can understand why people get suspicious of canvassing. But remember that when you start a business, if you're the business owner, the likelihood is that you would have had to canvass other people in order to get business. If all they're stating is, may I please leave my details with you in the event that either you or your customers may need my services, be polite and say, if you're not interested, be polite and say, no thank you. If they may potentially be of service to your customers, there's no way for you to guarantee who's genuine and who's not, but there are ways to help. Ask them for their details, ask them for their Australian business number, research them on the internet to see if they have a presence and what their reputation is. It's not foolproof, and yes, a person can be a highly sophisticated scammer, but there are also a lot of genuine canvassers out there who are simply looking to get business the way that you would have gotten business. And if you're certainly not a scammer, then you can't logically infer that everybody else is either. Again, you run your business the way you see fit, but use your discretion. Something I've also noticed is the attitude of some people in the helping professions, professions in which one of your primary roles is to be compassionate to other people when they're having difficulties. For example, medical professionals, allied health professionals, counsellors, social workers, funeral directors, and similar. Disability support services as well. I have seen way too many people in these industries who clearly are not passionate helping professionals. The way they present to the public as is somebody who has repressed frustration. In other words, they have a chip on their shoulder. Right? It's not everyone. Maybe it's just a few by comparison. A question that I don't think enough people ask themselves is, do you really want to help people, or do you just think you want to help people? Because you'd be surprised how powerful the mind is and how much it can fool you into actually thinking that you really desire to help people, when in reality you're entering a profession in which people assume you want to help people in order to help your own image. It's frightening, and again, it's not everyone, but it happens. And a lot of people, especially those who have had past adversity or perhaps trauma, may feel rather resentful of the world due to what's happened to them, what's been allowed to happen to them, or they may have done some morally questionable acts themselves, and entering into a profession of that description is their way of morally licensing themselves so that they can essentially tell themselves, I'm a good person because I'm doing this. One should never enter into a helping profession as a moral license. Your customers will suffer because over time, the way that you deliver service will become toxic. And some people simply don't convey good attitude and seem completely oblivious of how it affects their customers, how the customers are interpreting it. That's something of which you need to be aware, because customers will interpret it poorly and you may lose business, or worse, you may hurt them. You need to be highly self-aware in business. You need to be aware of why you're doing what you're doing, and you need to understand that you are ultimately serving your customers. Now, I also want to dispel the myth that it's only businesses themselves that are dishonest. Customers can have bad ethics as well, and something that we often see in the retail and hospitality industry is customers treating the floor staff, the people at the front desk, the customer service staff in an absolutely horrendous fashion. They're rude to them. When the business can't provide something, they blame the person at the front desk instead of understanding that they have a limited scope to make decisions in that business. They're often demanding discounts as if they are entitled to dictate how the business is run. They treat the business as though the business has all the power and all the money, and therefore they should give up some of what they have just for the customer because the customer believes they're entitled to it. First of all, running a business is not a license to print money. For the majority of business owners, running a business doesn't get you rich. It may earn you a comfortable living, but it certainly doesn't get you rich. Businesses have extreme demands. Business ownership can be extremely stressful. When a business charges what it charges, it often does that because it has to be able to cover its expenses, and running a business is not cheap. If you're speaking to floor staff, somebody at the entry level of the business, they don't get to make decisions. If you have a qualm about how the business is being operated, it usually has nothing to do with the person at the front desk. It has to do with the people who are making decisions about how the business is run. And even then, sometimes there may be a good reason why the business is run that way. You're entitled to politeness, safety, and honesty, but you're not forced to purchase from a given business. So you don't have the moral right to treat the business as though they are obliged to give you a discount or obliged to spend unreasonable efforts to serve you, because in the end, businesses have demands as well, and there's only so much they can give before it starts to cost them too much money. And if they were to do that for every customer, they would go out of business. So in conclusion, you have to understand that in order for an economy to operate in a healthy fashion, there needs to be a healthy relationship between customers and businesses. Businesses need a positive attitude. They need to know what they're selling. They need to know that it's worthwhile. They need to know what it actually does for the customer. And they have to be able to listen to and communicate well with their customers so that they can ultimately provide the customers objectively what is in their best interest, something that's going to satisfy them and something that's not going to give them any unpleasant surprises. Be respectful to the public. Show the public that you care about yourself as a business and how you're perceived, not just because it gets you money, but because you know it's the right thing to do. Be trustworthy. Don't just say you provide quality. Know what quality looks like, what it looks like for you, what it looks like for the customer, and then provide it. Be polite to people and understand that there are two sides to every story, and when you're interacting with someone, the dynamics in the interaction may be born of a number of factors associated with both your customer and yourself. And if you are a customer, understand the business has demands as well, and you're not the only customer. Businesses need to be able to serve the largest number of people in their market as possible, and they need to find compromise between the different ways that they can do that so that it's sustainable. So just because a business can't give you everything that you want, it doesn't mean that they're being unreasonable. So thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, do not take what you see on the internet as advice. If you have any concerns at all or need advice, please seek help from a professional. And I would love to hear from my audience. If you have an idea about what I could discuss on the program, or if you'd like to be a collaborator or be interviewed by me, then please feel free to contact me. I love hearing from my audience. And until next time, take care.